Welcome to another Just a Couple of Jerks with me, Paul Winstanley, and another regular person from the IT community. This episode, I'm speaking with Ami Arwidmark, and we had a real blast doing this episode. We talked about her love of horse riding and her love of playing the piano. And she could have taken both paths, really, for careers by the sound of it, but ended up in the IT community. It's a real good chat. We had a real good laugh, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Yeah, well, Ami Arwidmark. Have I
It's me.
pronounced your last name correctly? Yeah?
I don't even know how it's pronounced myself anymore. I've heard so many different
Yeah.
variations of it. So, whatever
It's
you want
not.
to say, if it's close enough, I'll respond.
I'll call you Amy.
Perfect.
That's easy. Yeah, it's a weird and wonderful name. I googled it. Can only find one other person with it. I don't know, some guy in IT.
Yeah.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
God knows.
very rare, fancy, made up
Yeah,
last name.
yeah. Is it real?
It is not a real name. I don't know
Is
if
it not?
Johan's okay with me telling people this, but it's not a real name.
Is
Um,
it not?
it's not. No, his family took the name when he married his first wife. Apparently, Anderson is a very common last name in Sweden, and he didn't want to be known as an
Okay.
Anderson any longer. So they,
And how's it achieved? Is it a combination of names or something or?
so Arvid is some guy in the family's name. So that, that's how they came up
Mhm.
with it. I don't know. So that's the story. That's why there's so few people in the world with the last name.
Yeah,
Isn't
two, I
that
think.
crazy? There's more. Johan has children. They're adults now. They live in Sweden, Louise and Emily. Well, actually,
Okay.
Emily lives in Spain right now. She's a baker in Mallorca. And Louise studied photography, and she's an incredible artist. So it's really cool seeing these two girls who they've become.
Baker's perfect at the moment.
Yeah.
So the last episode of the podcast, myself and Mike Marable talked about how to bake bread because that's where we're coming from really in these coronavirus times. We can't find bread out there, so we're making it. Um, how's it impacting yourself, Amy? The coronavirus. Oh, by the way, welcome to the Just a Couple of Jerks podcast, and
Thank you.
thanks for joining me. We are just a couple of jerks.
I'm
Um,
quite honored to be considered a jerk as well. So thank you for inviting me.
yeah, it's honoured to be a couple of jerks. Yeah, so obviously we talked about the coronavirus situation on all the podcasts so far, and it's obviously on everyone's mind. So we may as well just run through that, and how's that impacting you professionally? How's that impacting you on a personal level?
So I am extremely blessed, like I think many IT people are, that I've been working from home for the past 4 years or so. So for Johan and I, it's very little of a change. Now, Johan's impacted a little bit more because he traveled to customers and traveled to trainings and things like that. And I always wanted a way to keep him home. I wish that it wasn't this, but
Gosh,
I am
that was a good
extremely
result.
happy that he's
Yeah,
home and he's grounded. I think that he's starting to find some joy in being at home as well. So work is continuing on for us. Um, it is impacted a little bit now that my son's school has decided to close. He's 6 years old in kindergarten. Um, he was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and we were just starting to get in line with services from the school, and all of this happened. So,
right.
um, we're struggling a little bit there just to kind of figure out a way to help him learn and help him succeed and have a good day. But that means things like scheduling our work days. So he works in the mornings, I work in the afternoons, and then there's work into the evening to catch up on stuff that we couldn't get done in those partial days. But I,
Yeah,
I, I just
it's
feel
adding
bad
extra
complaining.
pressure, yeah.
Yeah,
Extra pressure, or just changing the way that you. Well, first with your son, what's his name again, Amy?
his name is Michael.
Michael. So I mean, he's out there in the community already. I've seen him quite a few photos and pictures, doing pretty cool things. But it's changing yourselves now anyway with that diagnosis, I suppose, in how you interact with him. Does that factor? Does that change at all?
I
And obviously
feel
now he's at home
relieved. I feel relieved that we
to get it
finally have a
right.
diagnosis, first of all.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
answers so many questions. It helps just frame how I approach things. I understand why I see mood swings or slowness in processing things.
Yeah.
Um, we've gone through intervention services before with very little answers. The people who do intervention services for children are heroes anyway, but just, to finally be able to get to a point where we were finally referred to the right person who could run through the tests to give a proper diagnosis. I feel so relieved. It's
Yeah. But I can imagine mixed emotions though, as well as relieved. There's kind of that. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Does
so
that?
I think the
Yeah.
mixed emotions really come from my like I'm being shoved into this full-time working parent and full-time teacher mode. I just have mixed emotions that way. I don't know how to help him succeed, especially when I'm already a little bit frustrated, to be honest, um, that I'm having to have these dual roles. I'm one of those people, I'm sure everyone in IT is like this, where you just want to do your best. And I think that we do a really good job of burning the candles at both ends, but now I'm also burning it in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. I've found that I've been called upon more for tech support at home. Um, yeah. So my wife, she tutors children, and so she's gone to Skype, and she is not tech savvy.
Okay.
She absolutely hates computers. She has this. She'll kill me for saying, but she has this thing where she has a Mac. There's a bad start. But she calls the hard drive her D drive. Yeah, because back in the day she worked for a company and they partitioned the drives. So D drive was where all the data went. So everything gets put on a D drive. And I said, "What do you mean? What? It's in. It's your documents folder. It's your And then so now it's like, okay, so because I need to get that from here. I need to put it on my Skype session. I'm doing Skype on the iPad. I'm like, oh my god, this is it's hard work, and but we get there. But tech support. It's today they couldn't hear the people on the call, but look, it was the other side. But we rebooted the classic. We fixed it in. But we
Yeah.
didn't fix it. They did. I just stood there and watched. It's like, yeah, it's working. So I'm tech support, and Wi-Fi router problems. I suddenly see all these teenage kids. So I've got four children. Three of them are here, with the other ones at uni, and they all come out
Okay.
of their rooms as soon as the router goes down or whatever. And oh, you exist. So I can imagine there's not as much call for tech support within the family for yourself. You can kind of cope in that
There's
area.
not too much. We are actually also hosting an exchange student, and it's funny that you say that your children only come out of their room when the internet goes down. We've had to implement a fake outage here and there with our teenage um,
Yes.
exchange student where we've called and called for dinner, and he's
Oh yeah.
in the middle
Yeah.
of some game with his friends and called some
Oh
more for dinner,
jeez.
and he doesn't come down, and accidentally the internet went out. It's the strangest thing. And wouldn't
It's
you
not
know,
just my
30
house then.
seconds
Crap.
later, he
This is
simply,
global.
yeah,
Yeah.
he just comes out of his room and I don't
Yeah.
know what happened. The internet's out. I'm like, oh man, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we have. So one of them I text, food's ready. Another one, it's WhatsApp. Another one is via Instagram. They've all got different methods of getting in touch. And then we look after my brother-in-law who has Down syndrome, and Alexa to get through to him to say
Okay.
food's ready. It's ridiculous. It's like, Jesus Christ, just come down.
Well,
It's
I mean,
food
on the
time.
one hand, it's proper social distancing. You're
Yeah,
only
yeah, we're following
communicating
the
through
guidelines.
technology, and
Yeah, yeah. God, heaven help if they come near me. Yeah, but yeah, we find out they're still alive at that point, and still existing. But yeah, the router goes down and they're all out at once. It's chaos. So it's good to know that that's global,
yeah.
and it's not just us. So yeah, we are called upon to teach now, and that's. I mean, are you getting involved in the day-to-day schooling then as well, or to help him?
So I don't mean to sound like I'm complaining against the school district. How they've implemented it is that we're not allowed to contact the teachers. They send us information on Sunday nights about what the plan is for the week. It's just hard for me. They had a practice session where all the kids got online and were face to face. And I felt torn for two reasons. One, because Johan and I are very invested in technology and particularly online collaboration, and just having pride in my work and hoping that my son follows in those footsteps. And he enters this online classroom and has this complete meltdown, isn't able to handle interacting with the students at all in an online
Right.
fashion, which showed us this is not the right way for him to learn. So we
Yeah.
are scrambling a little bit since we don't have a lot of access to the school, kind of scrambling to figure out what's the best approach to continue his education. So we've made the decision to look into actual proper homeschooling so that we
Sure.
can get the first grade curriculum and lesson plans and, just basically either prepare him for first grade when school starts again in the fall or keep him home in a homeschool program until we're confident that he can get the services that he needs when school starts again. Um,
Yeah, and,
I
and he
feel
will
like we're
get those,
walking
won't
such a
he?
fine line, and I'm not a child professional at all, and I genuinely have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm just trying my best to make the right decision for everybody.
And that's parenting, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a nutshell, it's like, what the hell am I doing?
I
I'm trying
remember
to learn this.
my Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say, I remember my uncle telling me when I first told him that I was pregnant, he said that there's never gonna be enough money and you're never gonna know what's the right answer, but somehow you survive. And that has stuck with
true.
me
But
since that day.
but true. But to them, it is the right answer, whatever you say.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the key. No, it's the hardest job in the world, as everyone says. It's a thankless task to a degree.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's you will get assistance. It's this you're thrown into, as we all are, into a very bizarre situation.
Yeah.
Um, and here they've got Google Classroom. I'm sure that's probably the same where you are.
Yeah.
And they're throwing work at the kids. I mean, my daughter was swamped in the first week. So we've been in lockdown for just over a week and a bit, where the schools were closed, and the kids were, yay, it's great. Um, but then it's like, okay, you're actually being schooled still, and they were being thrown tons and tons of work. And she kind of said one day, "There's too much. I can't cope with it." They weren't factoring in, so they were doing lessons and throwing work at them, not really interacting. Then it had to be uploaded for marking, and then they were being given homework. And she's just sat at the computer the whole day, and she was like, "It's too much." So luckily they've cut back a bit on that, because she was starting to feel the pressure, and she's coming up to 13. And
Wow.
it's pre, exams or that. It's a few more years before all that. But they're all different. Some kids would be able to handle that, and your son, it's not working for him in that way, and it's finding the right fit, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's not one fit for everyone, does it? The
Yeah.
kids are all different. Um, some kids they don't understand tech at all, although a lot of them do. I mean, a lot of them are a lot more natural than we were when we were younger using the tech.
Yeah,
So
they just use
y-
it from so young. They're just so comfortable, whereas, we were older and had other habits first. So it's,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
In fact, yeah, at that age they didn't exist when I was younger. So, it wasn't until Space Invaders came out. It's like, wow, what's this? Brilliant. How did you get into IT then, or computers, Amy? Was that something that you were interested in as a kid?
I had zero interest in technology as a child. I kind of wavered between several different career paths. For example, there was a long period where I wanted to be a concert pianist, and I studied piano very seriously and had opportunities to play in music halls in the town that I grew up in. But I
Which
never
is
pursued.
where did you grow up?
So I lived all around the Midwest, but when I was very serious about the piano, I lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I played at the St. Cecilia Music Society. So
Cool.
shout out to Mrs.
Ah,
Carroll, my piano teacher, if you're listening to
so,
this for whatever
oh
reason.
yeah,
Thanks.
she's a big fan. um, were you studying grades then? Were you kind of going up the levels, or is that do you have the grade system in the States
For school or for piano?
for piano? Yeah.
So it depends. There's two major publishers, I guess you'd call them, for learning reading music and writing. And I had switched between three different teachers just based on where we lived in the town. So they all had their different preferences, but in the end, it was very little, what would you call it, like level theory and playing. And I was just
Right.
given actual music to learn and play and given a recital date.
So you weren't being assessed effectively, yeah. You just kind of for pleasure,
Yeah,
but learning, yeah.
I guess, yeah, but I was so passionate about it. And it's so funny. Mrs. Carroll, my favorite piano teacher, would say, if you want to learn a popular song, so, oh gosh, who was popular back then? Like the Spice Girls and Savage Garden and other weird pop music like that. Anyway, she would compromise and say, if you wanted to learn to play pop music, you had to learn two classical pieces. And I was the weird kid who only wanted to play classical music. And
Hmm.
she would give me like more like classical type pop music. Like I learned the theme to Dr. Zhivago and I had zero interest in playing that. And I think at one point I was thrown the theme to Titanic and I had zero interest in playing that. And I had this little sculpture. I'm so weird and I can't believe I'm admitting this, but I had this little sculpture of Beethoven's head, like what's this called, like a bust or whatever, sitting
Yeah.
on my piano, and I had this giant book of his sonatas, and I learned most of those. And oh gosh, I played in concert band and the pit orchestra in high school, and I can remember convincing my band teacher to let me play one of Beethoven's sonatas during my band concert.
No,
I
that's
also
cool.
played the clarinet and the bass clarinet, so I was just a weird
Geez,
kid. So in a
that's
way,
not weird.
like
No, God, no. No, no.
in a
All
way,
my
I guess it's kind of fitting that I ended up in IT. Um,
yeah. Well, what a come down. You should have carried on. You should have done the piano stuff. That's brilliant. I mean, my eldest, he does viola, bass, double bass. Picks a, I tried to learn guitar 10 plus years ago. I'm terrible. I can do some chords, but he learnt viola. Got up to the top levels, in the assessments and that. And picks a guitar up and he's just like off he goes, and you're thinking, geez, you didn't even learn it. I've gone through 10 years of lessons and I can get about four chords out. And then my third son, he learned the piano, so his thing was ragtime.
okay,
Absolutely love ragtime, and
yeah,
is it the Entertainer and Scott Joplin and all that.
yeah.
My second boy, drums. God, drums, jeez. So you can tell what he's like as a character, yeah. So jeez, he's like his animal off the Muppets, Dave Grohl. And we bought a drum kit at Christmas. Jesus, right. And then my daughter, she does a mix of things. She does like the violin, and she's got a bass guitar, and she goes out and does singing. So it's all, it's great. And if I could turn back the clock, and if I'd have done guitar as a kid, well, I wish I had, because I actually probably would have been able to play it. You have more time, you've got more, you less, I think you're thinking about it less. Maybe I might be wrong there, but I'm looking at both hands going, right, my left hand needs to do this now, and my right hand needs, and then like 3 minutes later I've managed to change to the next chord. It's like so slow. It's like, oh geez.
Yeah.
And I could have forgotten IT completely and gone out and been like a session musician traveling the world or something. I don't know. Who knows? It's better. The grass is always greener. But no,
Yeah,
I think
for
it's
sure.
great. I think it's great that you did that. But so actually, you're going back. You mentioned the Spice Girls earlier, and I'm not going to quiz you on them, but I wrote down a couple of things, and one is pathetic, right? One of the things I wrote down was a question, and it was New Kids on the Block or Backstreet Boys. Which was your favourite, if any?
Well, definitely Backstreet Boys. I mean, I was a lot younger when New Kids on the Block were popular. I definitely had one of their posters in my bedroom, but I had become more of a young adult when Backstreet Boys were around.
Right.
And when Backstreet Boys and NSYNC were competing to be the cool
Oh God,
kids,
NSYNC,
I
Jesus.
stayed loyal to Backstreet Boys. And it wasn't
Right.
until Justin Timberlake launched his solo career that I was like, you know what? Forget all of them. Just me and
Yeah. So
JT.
did you have? Was that it? It was like this is the man.
Yeah.
So hold on then. So how old are you, Amy? You're 30 something, I'm
Uh-huh.
guessing.
I'm 22.
22. That's the one. So yeah. So yeah. Because I was thinking I'd written down. That's another thing. I wrote down 80s girl, and then my question was NKOTB or Backstreet Boys.
I was
It's
definitely born in the 80s, but I am 22. So I'll let you do that
right.
math.
You are 22, yeah?
No, I'm not.
No, sorry, you've got me. I'm useless. No, so yeah, it's 22. Crikey, yeah. 1998 you were born. Really? So you missed all that. It was great. The 90s were great.
Yeah.
And we luckily avoided New Kids on the Block and all those because we had Take That.
Okay.
You heard of Take That? You heard of them?
No.
Oh, jeez. Take That. Yeah, I'm not a Take That fan at all. So there are boy band from the UK that were massive. Well, I thought they were world famous. Have you
No.
heard of Robbie Williams?
Yes.
Right. Well, he was one of those.
Okay.
He was a Take That. Gary Barlow, his mate.
Nope.
No. Okay. So not as big as they think they are. Then really, they haven't cracked the states. So who were the big UK bands that hit the states then in the 90s? Were there any?
Spice Girls.
Oh God, yeah. So come on then. You were a Spice Girls fan then, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely sat front row for the Spice Girls movie with my
Spice
girlfriends.
World.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it.
it's a really good movie. I think that you
Is
should
it?
watch it. Yeah.
Is it? What, for Richard Grant? That's probably why.
I have no
Yeah,
idea. It was so long ago. I don't remember. I just
yeah.
remember being so excited to go and just,
Well, you were only about two by the sounds of
yeah,
it when it came
exactly.
out.
I
So
was
yeah,
two. It was my first outing without my parents. I was just so excited.
yeah. Spice World, fantastic. So have you seen them live? Have you?
No,
No,
I haven't. Um,
that's a shame.
Funny you ask about concerts. My mom, before she passed away, she was so obsessed with the Black Eyed Peas, and she would listen on repeat with her phone, like with the volume turned up as loud as it would go, because she didn't have their CD. This is how long ago this was. She didn't have their CD, and she would listen to Boom Boom Pow on repeat
I've never heard of it.
to and from her commute,
Jeez.
which was like 30 minutes or so.
What, the
And
one
she is
song?
one of those parents who would be like, I'm only listening to it for the music. I don't know the words. So we would explain to her like what songs were that she actually really liked, like the thong song, for example. That was one of her
Oh,
favorites that she like, how can you not hear those words when they're singing? But anyway, she was obsessed with them. We went to a concert of the Black Eyed Peas at an IMAX theater. So they were streaming live from somewhere in California, and you could watch live at an IMAX theater. So we did
okay, so
that.
you weren't actually at the concert, you were watching it on the screen,
Yeah, but
but
it
it
was
felt
still
like you
pretty
were there,
cool.
yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And she
yeah.
thought it was the greatest thing. And I'm like, if my mom's happy, I'm going to be happy. So it was
That's
great.
cool. I mean, I've never heard of Boom Boom Pow, and if I could get the copyright to the song, I'd have it on the end of the podcast, but
It
we'll probably
could be your
get my
outro
arse sued.
music.
Yeah, Boom Boom Pow. I will check that one out on Spotify. They did do a song. God, I don't even know what it's called or how it goes, but yeah, I know they're big. And I nearly
Yeah.
called him William there. He does the voice in the UK, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, with Tom Jones. You heard of Tom Jones?
No, I am so
Oh, jeez.
lame for pop culture. I think I stopped paying attention in the early 2000s. Just got
Well,
busy with other
he's from the
things.
1960s. He's about
Okay.
80 odd years old, this guy. And yeah, he's from Wales and he's from like the mining towns. And he's got an amazing voice. And he's been around forever. He did a cover of Prince's Kiss in the 90s. And you were watching this grown up man gyrating his hips and thinking, oh my goodness me, please give up. But he was one of these who that the mums used to throw their underwear at him in the 60s and 70s, and yeah, great. Anyway, but yeah, concerts. I mean, you might actually have heard of these artists, but the first concert I ever went to was in the 80s. I went to see Michael Jackson live on the Bad Tour, and followed by Madonna. Who's that girl? I think. So yeah,
Okay.
big names,
Yeah, big
and
names. I definitely know who they are.
yeah, yeah. So we're good there. And then after that, I kind of went, oh, mainstream. I'm in my teens now, and then I started going to little concerts and stuff with bands that no one had ever heard of. Um, but yeah, no Black Eyed Peas. I've heard of them, so that's a good start. So going back to your IT, not your IT career, but going back to your early life, as in your career and what you wanted to do. You did all the music stuff, but how did IT come about, or did you something you fell into, or how did that happen?
So a lot of people don't know this. I went to college to study Bible, youth ministry, and family studies, and I was in a missions class of all classes. And I remember doing something on the computer, and I remember the professor just pulling me aside after class and being like, I have to tell you something, and you're probably not going to like it. And I'm like, whatever, I like everything. So he told me he
This is
told
your
me that
destiny.
he told me that God had told him that I wasn't supposed to be in the ministry and that I
Okay.
was supposed to have a career in computers. And this was heartbreaking for me because I grew up in a religious family and I genuinely believed that I was supposed to be in ministry, that I was going to marry a youth pastor, and that we would just have this church life.
Mm.
Um, and it
And
was really,
heartbreaking that he told you you're going to be in IT.
yeah, it was
Like, what? Oh no.
like, what? Where is this coming from?
Jeez.
Um, so I struggled with that for several years, and I dropped out of college. I ended up becoming a horse trainer because I had grown up riding horses as well.
Yeah.
And I kept getting hurt, which is something that's very common in horses, so no surprise there. And I
Hmm.
still continue to get hurt with my horses.
Yeah.
But anyway, my family staged an intervention for me, and they were basically like, it was like, if you want to keep being in this family, you have to stop doing horses professionally and you have to find a job. So I found a job. I listened to them because I value my family very much.
Mm.
But anyway, I
Yeah.
listened to them and I found a job as a contractor doing a XP to Windows 7 migration, and things took off from there. And I fell in love with OS deployment. Um, Rhonda Layfield was the popular person at the time, so I actually learned before then, before meeting Johan, mostly everything I knew about OS deployment I learned from her. Um, and I'm sad that she's disappeared because I wanted to thank her, and I've never had the opportunity to say thank you. You know, I see so many people come up to like Johan and Michael and other MVPs and say thanks so much. But I never got to thank my IT hero. So if you're listening, Rhonda, I love you.
Yeah. There's a possibility of her listening to this compared to your piano teacher, so you
Yeah,
never
yeah,
know.
closer, closer to home than
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
But yeah, uh-huh.
Wow. So XP to 7 migration, you thought, well, this is it for me.
This is
This
it.
is this
Yeah,
is the thing. Yeah, yeah. Wow. And so yeah, I mean, going back to horses then, because I know you've got a big passion with horses. I've seen pictures of you with your horse.
yeah.
You post out, and I think you've done some. Have you done some fundraising things as well?
Yeah,
Might be
I do a
wrong.
lot of work with horse rescues. I think it's very important as an equestrian, especially as an adult amateur, because I think that we're the ones that make the horse world go round. I think it's very important for us to stay active in the community, to give back, to have our voice heard, and to be a voice to neglected horses. There's a really big problem in our country with neglected horses and with horses shipping across the US borders, both into Mexico and Canada, for horses being sold for slaughter. And we in the US don't eat horse meat. I realize other people in the world do. Um,
We
but
don't.
but the conditions that the horses travel in to cross the border and the way that they're slaughtered is
Mm,
something that's actually quite terrible. And I think that that needs to change. So anyway, I do a lot of work raising awareness for that. I spend a lot of time and a ridiculous amount of money um, rehabbing horses. I typically buy horses off the racetrack or buy horses who have basically have no other hope. It's me or the meat truck, and I spend
right.
a lot of time with them, just trying to teach them new skills and find new homes for them. There's only one horse that I've ever had to buy back in all of my years of doing that, and I just retired her out to Pennsylvania last winter, or I'm sorry, last spring, a year ago today, with my son's horse who was ready to retire. So I have two horses that live out in Pennsylvania that are just happy being horses, and then the other horses that I've rescued and then sold on to other homes I still keep in touch with, and they're very happy. And of course, the horse that I have now was one of those last chance kind of guys, and for sure, this one can never go down the road. He's too dangerous to be owned by anyone else,
Right.
and we just kind of roll with the punches or the kicks, so to speak, and
Yeah.
just keep trying to break down the barriers. And he's a very good horse, and I think that he'll continue to be a good horse, but he'll be an Arwidmark for the rest of his life, like it or not.
That's a really nice thing you do actually, and I'm interested to see how you tame them. So you've got the horse here that's not doing it. Is that just something the horse might have gone through in its life that's caused it to
There's
be that way?
so
Or
much controversy around the thoroughbred racing industry because horses are broke to ride and they're competing, a lot of them, before they actually turn two. We have had some racehorses that have been good advocates that raced starting in their 3-year-old year. But horses, especially thoroughbreds, their bones don't stop maturing until they're about 10 years old. So you're taking something that's extremely young, asking it to become an athlete, and you run into a lot of issues on how something that is flighty by nature, how you teach it while it's still developing, teach it to carry itself and a rider and do all these scary things. And some of them cope very well and they're very successful and stop racing just because their bodies can't handle it, but most of them stop racing because their minds can't handle it. So then you're left with this 1,500-pound thing that's basically an orangutan. And I, I'll never forget a vet on the racetrack telling me that thoroughbred horses wake up with one of two thoughts: homicide or suicide. And that's never been more true than it is with
wow,
the horse that I have now, Hal. He's
Crikey. So how do you treat him? How do you work with him? What sort of thing? What's the method to do it?
establishing dominance and being very fair. Horses are always looking for a leader, and if they don't trust you to be a leader, they'll be a leader. Horses
Right.
are intelligent, but their intelligence does have its limits. So he
Yeah.
knows that he needs to protect himself. He doesn't understand that he's, exponentially larger than I am. So he doesn't reason through and think, oh, if I slam into her, I might send her flying. It's, oh my goodness, she's not protecting me from whatever this scary thing is. So I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And that's always
Okay.
when a disaster occurs, is when they think for themselves. So
Sure.
it's,
And then can they have this dominance thing though in general? Sort of like you say, if you're not being dominant, and they'll be dominant all the time, and
yeah,
try and push that.
yeah. And that's
Yeah.
actually something that's extremely common in ponies and
Okay.
in female horses. I'm not saying that every pony or every mare they're called is overly dominant, but it's something that's very common in those two categories. So typically, when parents ask me for their kid, what should I get? It's, well, probably not a pony, definitely a gelding. They're just quieter, more easygoing. They're definitely dominant geldings. I just find them easier um, because some of their natural self has been taken away.
Mm,
They
mm,
are able to think a little bit more clearly.
yeah. That's interesting. I know. So I've not personally seen this with dogs, but dogs have this ability, don't they, to be dominant. And we
Hmm?
had some friends who had a dog that was always barking with them and being quite nasty, and they were trying to help it. And it's one part where they had, I think, the dog psychologist come around or whatever, and they noticed the dog was kind of putting its paw and its leg over the man's arm, which they thought was an affectionate thing. And the psychologist said, no, the dog's being dominant there by doing that. It was a really interesting little thing that it did.
Yeah.
I'm putting my arm across you and on top of you, and not holding you down, but you know what I mean. It's kind of the way that they do it, and people look into all this, the psychology behind it all. And I'm sure you're involved with that with the horses as well, to get a feel for how the things that they do and pick up on that, and then try and change that. I suppose maybe it's stopping that from happening if they're doing that dominant thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
I mean, we also have dogs. We've rehabbed three dogs now that have been found basically feral on chicken farms eating the eggs.
right.
And we took them in and trained them, and it's learning body language and learning how to program impulse control. Um,
Right.
so yeah,
Impulse
it's
control being
so for a
what
dog, they do
exactly?
things on impulse. So I want food. I'm going to
Right.
do this. I'm going to do that. And because they're higher on the totem pole as far as what would you call that hierarchy for
Yep.
predator versus prey, they don't tend to think in survival mode. They think in, getting food in my belly and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
I think
teaching
I'm. I
them,
think I'm like that.
yeah, you
Yeah.
have to teach them really, these are the boundaries and these are my expectations. And I mean, it's just like with a toddler, right? You give them an inch and they take a
I was going
mile.
to say
So
we're back to kids again.
yeah,
It is all that, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, and
it's,
they'll push it. They'll push it as much as they can. The dogs I'm talking about here, not the kids. I know they'll do it as well. Yeah. So the horses. I mean, you've obviously had this interest from a young age. Am I right
yeah,
there?
I would say that I was probably 3 when I realized that I was different from the rest of my family and that I was born to be an equestrian. And I can remember with my grandparents convincing them to call one of their friends who lived on the farm next door. My grandparents had a tree farm, which is very boring. And then their
Tree
neighbor
farm.
had horses. And I
What's a
remember
tree farm?
they
Sorry. What's
they grew pine trees. So kind of like a tree nursery, but
Just grow trees.
so some of them they sold on to other nurseries for that would end up like for construction or consumer stuff like that. But a lot of them was just a reforestation project of theirs that they were doing with some friends.
Okay,
Um,
I'm sure they were busy, but it just sounds like I'll just stick a couple of trees in the ground. We'll come back
yeah,
in a few
there's
years and
actually a lot of work to do on a tree farm, like clearing up brush and checking the health of the trees and things like that.
fair enough. I'm
Yeah.
mocking it, but yeah.
So anyway, they called up their neighbor and somehow the neighbor agreed, yeah, sure, there's nothing better for a 5-year-old girl to do than sit on this pasture ornament that we have. So I went and sat on this horse named Aramis, and that was it for me. And found out a way to get horseback riding lessons and took lessons for several years and worked my way into becoming a working student. So I worked for a professional and paid for a lot of my lessons and a lot of my opportunities that way with just elbow grease and physical labor. And then finally purchased my own horse when I had graduated from college.
Oh, okay,
And
so how old are you then, Amy, when you graduate, roughly?
I was 6 or 7 when I graduated college. No, I
Yeah, okay.
graduated. Well, I got an associate's degree before I dropped
22.
out. So, gosh, that would have made me
22.
22. Yeah.
Yeah, this a bit of a common age, this one. Yeah. But have you got any pictures of your first horse then, Aramis? You've got pictures of you and the horse together, or is that just memories?
I am sure there's a photo of me on Aramis somewhere around, but the first horse that I owned was named Penelope.
Penelope.
Yep.
Brilliant.
Yep.
And did you name her Penelope?
No. So in the beginning, the horses that I got had the names that they came with, and I didn't start
Right,
changing names until I started getting into the rehab work. And I find sometimes it's easier to change a name to give them a new future. Um,
right. Break the pass.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
clean start.
yeah, and you always run into that. Are you changing the name so that when you sell it, you're hiding the past? And it wasn't ever anything like that. But it was just more of a, there's no reason to call them. I mean, typically they come with their track name, which is always something really ridiculous. I had a horse off the
Mm.
track that was named Pork Chop Jones, and there was
That's
just no way I
brilliant.
was calling him that. Like how do you come up with a good bird name from that name? So he was called
I love
Dudley.
that. That's great. I might actually change my name to that. Pork Chop Jones.
He
Brilliant.
was he was bred by my vet of all people, and I had no idea at the time when I bought him that it was my vet that had bred him. And it wasn't until my vet came to do shots one spring and was like, "This horse looks so
Pork Chop,
familiar.
it's
Do you do
you.
you do you know what name he raced under?" And I told him, and he was like, "Oh, that's my horse."
Pork Chop. You will be back together again.
Yep.
What a
So
great story. Yeah.
Pork Chop stayed with me for quite a long time, and when he was ready to
What did you
stop,
rename? What did you rename Pork Chop Jones to then?
he was named Dudley.
Sorry, go on.
Dudley was his name, and
Totally.
we had a very, very successful show career, and there just came a point where it wasn't fair to him to jump the big fences anymore. So when he was ready to start, winding down his career, I sold him to a fellow adult amateur who had enough money to own her own horse and, had kind of graduated from the lesson program and wanted to take on horse ownership. I sold him to her, and he spent his days with her.
Oh,
So,
that's nice. Yeah.
yeah,
So do you say do you still do competitions then? You
I
still
do. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
how
we
much
have.
time does horses take up of your week then?
Depends on if the folks at Two Pint are listening or not as to how I'm gonna
Okay,
answer
not
that
much.
question.
Not much. No, no.
Well, no, actually zero right
We'll,
now. With
we'll
the
cut this bit.
shelter in place order that we have, all of the riding facilities have shut down, so
Of
I'm not
course.
allowed access to
Yeah.
my horse at all.
Oh no. So you can't even go and have a look at all?
No,
No.
no, I can pay board, but I I can't get to my horse. And I mean, I understand it stinks for everybody, but we're all in the situation together, and the barn staff is still in there taking care of the horses, and to be honest, I'm sure they're all quite happy for the break.
Yeah.
being allowed to be horses for a few months. And, in the grand scheme of
Yeah.
things, it's really not that big of a deal. So,
They're just chilling out now, yeah.
yeah, they're out in their fields and they come in at night and get brushed and fed and, put away, and they're being horses, so it's okay. Um,
Yeah. They're happy now.
but to answer the question, if things were normal, I typically take 4 riding lessons a week, and the riding lessons are about 45 minutes long, and you have getting the horse
Okay.
ready and
So
untacking them at the
when you
end.
say
So
lessons, that's more sessions, is it? Or lessons where you're being taught things?
yeah, I work with a professional. Um,
Okay.
he he rode for El Salvador back in the day, and now he's in the
Okay.
U.S. and I'm working with him with the hopes of just kind of working my way up with this silly horse that I have.
That's pretty
Um,
cool.
yeah,
So you can jack the IT stuff in, become a pro equestrian.
yeah, and a pro piano teacher, I guess, to my son, and a school teacher. Look at all these things I can do.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Why are we bothering with this IT stuff? I can't do anything else, so that's why I do it. It's like I'm useless at, going back to the teaching stuff. The kids come down, Dad, what's a noun? Sorry, what? Go speak to Mum. A verb. You're looking at the wrong guy. Yeah,
Have you ever
but
played Mad Libs?
Mad Libs? No.
Okay, you need to download the app, or if you can find a book, you should buy it. Mad Libs is kind of like Choose Your Own Adventure, but with words. So you get a paragraph, and there are keywords that are taken out, and you
Okay.
you fill in the blank. So underneath the blank, it'll say, put in a verb or put in an adjective or whatever. So
Yeah, is this for 6-year-olds?
it's,
It's like I'm gonna struggle with it.
it's a
No,
really fun game. So you should try it with your kids. It'll definitely
we
help them solidify what the parts of speech are, and you'll have a laugh doing it.
do you know what? They know more than me, to be honest. I think my wife's probably got it. She's got hundreds of different kind of games for words and things like that. And I've never seen these games. They're kind of weird and wonderful. But yeah, I mean, I do know what a verb is. It's a doing word.
Yeah, action word.
There you go. And a verb, no, that is a verb. And a noun is a naming word. So if you ask me what all the rest are, I haven't got a clue. But I can write, so that's it. Doesn't matter. It makes sense when I type it. So that's all good. And my wife tests me, and I go, "Oh God, I don't know." It's quite funny. Please, and so I'll start asking her IT questions, and she just turns off immediately.
Seems
It's
fair.
like, yeah, yeah. She just goes, "What is it you do again?" Just ask people to restart their computers. That's
Isn't
about
that the
it.
truth?
God, fix. Well, it fixed the Skype problem tonight, so job done. Yeah, perfect. So going back to IT, then we're touching on IT again. So you did this Windows 7 XP to 7 migration. The good old days. Done those myself back in the past. Um, and so that was your first exposure to IT, was it? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so were you working in a permanent job then? Were you how did you get into that? I mean, when I did an XP to 7 migrations, I had to prove how much experience I had, or was it a case of we need people to help out?
They needed people who had 3 to 5 years of prior IT experience and a college degree, and I just left some information out, and
Well,
and
the
I got and
experience,
I
yeah.
got yeah, and I got the contract, and I did so
Just the
well.
5 years worth. I didn't have that. Okay, come on board. Yeah, doesn't matter. We're
And
desperate.
I eventually was converted from contractor to full-time
Oh,
employee,
okay.
and I went from there into a change management role. So,
Oh God, I'm sorry about
you know what? It taught me to get really confident in what I knew about that uh,
that. What? So
in-house
understanding
app
what people were asking
application.
for.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Yeah.
miserable, don't get me wrong, but I I
Is it?
just learned a lot of things that I wouldn't have learned otherwise on how to question things and how to read for detail and figure out if people are doing their work
Yeah.
because I was the gatekeeper between the dev and test environment as well as test and prod. So kind of if something breaks in prod, it's kind of my fault. You know,
Yeah.
if you
You've
can
let this happen. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I just learned to get really confident at saying no. I learned that developers don't always fill in their release notes. I would often get blank release notes or identical release notes from the release before. So I had to get really confident and basically telling people I knew they weren't doing their job. And, you know,
Oh, I know
it's,
your type.
and
Can
I
you
did
fill
it
that
and I
change form
was
in, please? Oh God.
very disliked for a while, but you know, then you
Yeah.
learn how to do things diplomatically so that you're not burning bridges, so you're not the bad guy. And you know, once I learned
Yeah.
how to do that, I feel like my career kind of took off a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
so then
Well,
I,
let's face it, it's change control and PMs. They're the two people we're just going,
they're the
we're
worst.
moan. Oh, geez, yeah. Doing your head in. But it's good, like you say, you get that exposure. You're questioning things, I suppose. You know, if I go into change control meetings and there's another department there that I'm not really involved with, I'm going, what the heck are they talking about?
Yeah.
So you're having to pick up on all that, understand it, and then approve it effectively. Yeah.
Yeah. So there were definitely a lot of broken production releases in the beginning, and you
Yeah.
just learn very quickly. Um, Picked up a
Yeah.
little bit of coding. I had to learn some very, very rudimentary SQL, um, PowerShell, and you know, gosh, they were using these batch files for their for their production releases. But you know, you learn to read code, and
Right.
I have no interest in being a developer or anything to do with coding at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but here we are. I'm still in IT.
Still in IT. No, I don't know. I love the days when we didn't bother with change control. Miss those. And we just unplug servers, shift them across, and plug them back in again, and then take the flak later.
Ask
you
for
know,
forgiveness.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more sensible now to do that, and we do love that paperwork. It's fantastic. So what I do as a consultant, I just ask the people I work for to fill in the gaps for me. just This is what I want to do, and what will go wrong? Nothing. Nothing will go wrong. So it'll all be fine, and they just go great, and it works. So from change control, then you went then back into kind of what a support type thing or a project based thing. How did it
I
manifest
kind
after
of
that?
straddled a, we'll call it like level three help desk sysadmin kind of role for several years after that. Um, oh gosh. So I worked for this architecture firm that got bought out by a very large architecture firm, and I will never forget the day when they came to me and they were like, you know, we've decided to keep you on. You know a lot about basically where the bodies are hidden, as most people in help desk support type roles know. And
Hmm.
I just remember them saying, you know, we don't really feel like you have earned or deserved or whatever, however they said it. I just remember like my face kind of feeling kind of hot, and I just remember kind of like maybe blacking out a little bit when they were basically
Mm,
telling me that I couldn't have a sysadmin type role, that they wanted me to go back into doing help desk.
okay.
And I just, you know, kind of told them where they could shove their job.
In a polite way, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and, and I
Go on, what
walked,
did you say? No, you're all right. Don't worry.
yeah, well, I gave proper notice, and then I took a month vacation and started with another company as a senior sysadmin. So obviously, someone saw my value, and then from there,
Yeah.
I stepped away from help desk and basically sysadmin work when I started working for Adaptiva, and they really opened the door for me for understanding what it was like to be in technical marketing. So that was a big life changer for me when I started working with them.
Yeah,
And
and
then
you had a
I,
lot of exposure, I suppose, with them.
yeah, for
And
sure, yeah.
And you were doing a few webinars, I think. If I'm Correct me if I'm wrong. And obviously, you become a because you already had that presence out there at that point. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure you had. And then by being part of that, you've got even further exposure via them in this community that we're in.
Yeah.
And you would have probably, I'm assuming here, learned quite a lot through that.
You know, there was a meme floating around a long time ago about how, when you start off and then you think you've like learned everything and you're like sitting at this high peak, only to realize when you get to the top, there's this cliff that you're basically thrown over. And when you hit the bottom, that's when you're like, I just figured out that I actually don't know anything at all. And that was kind of where I was at
I'm
in
still there.
yeah, in my role at Adaptiva, because it's just you're put in front of customers, and
Yeah.
this has nothing to do with them. Just you're put in front of customers who have these issues that have nothing to do with the software that they're selling, and you have to differentiate between, okay, is this actually something wrong in their config manager environment, or is this something
Mm-hmm.
that the software is doing? Is it none of the above, all of the above? And so you just, for me, that's where imposter syndrome kicked in, where I was like, holy cow, I thought I knew
Yeah.
things and I know nothing and I just want to hide. Um,
Did you get stressed out by it?
I was quite stressed out by it. I think I was more embarrassed than anything, where
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I knew stuff and clearly didn't, and just kind of panicked. Like
So,
when people get when people get
well,
famous and then, they like go crazy. Like I
yeah,
feel like that happened to me a little bit because I was like people are looking to me for help. I have no idea how to answer the question, but they won't
yeah,
go away.
yeah, and yeah. So that's it. I mean, I suffer from it all the time, and what I've kind of stopped doing is thinking, oh, okay, I don't know everything. They can't expect me to know everything, and until you train yourself with that frame of mind, you're going to be stressed out by it, and feel the pressure. Um, and when I used to do engagements originally, I was in probably exact same situation to yourself, um, where in your head you're going, "Oh Jesus Christ, I don't know, I've got to find this out." But I think what it is that for me personally, I'm able to go away and do that, and find the answers where and that's just by applying myself to it. And I can imagine you will do that. You'll go off and go, okay, right, I don't know this. And as we know with Config Manager, it's a huge product. So there are many areas you won't know, and many areas that you do know. But you'll go off and you'll investigate it quite a lot of the time in your own personal time as well.
Yeah.
Is that what you did? You just went, okay, right, I need to get up to speed and do it before I have a breakdown.
I mean, I think when I stepped away from being, we'll call it in the weeds, when I stepped into a technical marketing role, there was no differentiation between personal time and work time. It was just,
Yeah,
I'm I'm in the thick of it, trying to figure things out. Doesn't matter what time of day or what time of night it is. Doesn't matter where on the planet I'm at. I have to work on this thing. And I remember sectioning my life into, all right, on Wednesday at 3, I'm going to leave for 2 hours and go ride my horse. And
yeah,
then when I come home, I'm buried in whatever config manager problem, OSD problem it is, until I can lift my head up and find a couple more days, later in the week where I can say, all right, I'm going to survive these next 3 days because then I know I can leave and go ride my horse. Um,
yeah,
but I mean,
yeah.
I think that's kind of a common problem. And I think people working from home now who haven't been working from home before are going to see how much harder it is to have boundaries between work time and personal time. Um, and you
Yeah,
just
that's
kind of have
it.
to
That
figure it
is a
out.
problem. Yeah, no, it's very tricky, and I think I'm sure I was speaking to Harjit earlier in the week, and he was saying exactly the same. And he was talking about having different areas in his house where before he would sit on the sofa, I tend to sit on the sofa and chill out, put my feet up. I've got the music on, but this is where I relax on an evening as well. And he said, yeah, he used to do the same, but found that he'd just sit there and carry on. So he just purposefully takes himself into a corner now, into his own little office space, and then switches off. There are many people who can switch off, though. Some people who just, it's the end of the day, turn off. That's it. I'm not going to do any more. But I'm not one of those people, and I pretty much assume that you're not as well. But at least you've
No.
got that um, option. You've got that interest to go off, and the horses are there. You've got your son as well. All these little things that bring you back down to normality, and take you away from that.
I have to say,
And
one of the things that I love about working for Two Pint is I can say to Phil and Andreas, look, I'm tired of troubleshooting stuff with Config Manager. I want to spend some time learning networking things. So I'm going to study for this certification, and I did this with the Network Plus exam over the course of 3 weeks, studied everything and took the exam, and I was able to come back and say, you know what? I'm really interested in this. And they've
yeah,
just been like, okay, great. So,
so they encourage that. Yeah,
they're encouraging, and you just get so burned out when you have a hard time separating work and personal, and at least I have something else to burn myself out on now.
yeah. What, networking?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the thing. I took 6 weeks off over the Christmas period because I'd spent a couple of years working on multiple projects. Things, I take on board work. I freelance. I'm an independent freelancer, so I will go and do the work. And if someone comes in and says, "Oh, can you help us with this?" I say, "Yeah, yeah, of course." And so I might have things overlapping where I'm helping out different customers, all this sort of thing, and it works, but it's busy. And I just thought, right, I need time off, and so I took the 6 weeks off, and I went off and studied the Microsoft exams for the M365. My son was like, "I thought you weren't good on your computer, Dad." It's like, yeah, I'm not. You are. It's like I know these are exams, but it's like it's like what's my downtime? Oh, I'll study some exams. So I need to get some
It's
horses.
different and interesting.
Yeah, it is. I've still got two more to do actually. I'm just trying to fit them in. I thought, should I do them sooner rather than later, really? But you've got to have that downtime, and obviously, you were awarded MVP a few years ago, same as myself, and that was achieved with hard work and
Yeah.
commitment to the community and to sharing and to blogging, talking, whatever it is you're doing. Um, and then when you get on board, you're still doing that. It's a continual thing, and that's it's not like, oh, I've done that now. I'll just stop. Great, I've achieved it. You did, and my thing, and I always say this: I was never out there to become an MVP. Um, it, I didn't stumble into it, but it was never a goal for me.
Yeah.
But when I got it, it was like, great, that's fantastic. In the last year, it became a bit of a goal. So because people say, no, you should be an MVP. But you're constantly doing this. So, how did you get into the MVP thing? What, you've got your blog, amycasto.com. That's still it. You still do that?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't post on there super regular anymore, other than the user group content, just because my focus is just so different these days. But I traveled the world and spoke at so many conferences and so many user groups um, that last year before becoming an MVP. And I think it was pretty similar for me. For the longest time, I had no idea what it was. I was just contributing to the community because that just seemed like a reasonable thing to do. And then I became nominated, and understood that process. And it's quite a long process from your first nomination to your actual award. So then, of
Yeah.
course, there's that anticipation, kind of like a kid, like, is it Christmas yet? Can I open my present yet?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
do get a little bit of restlessness once you realize that you're in that possible uh, award process.
Yeah. I mean, it was 2 years for me. I was nominated, yeah, 2 years before I actually got it. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And then I just thought, that's never going to happen, really. I'll just carry on as I'm doing, just helping people out. But it was only really, like I say, in that last year when I thought, you know what? I'm doing all this. I may as well give it a go. It may happen, it may not, but at least I've given it a shot. And yeah, geez, it was a massive surprise. I really wasn't expecting it in the slightest. And I know you were very visible, so I mean, I was really just doing my blog, doing some user groups in the UK, that sort of thing. But you're kind of visible on the ignites and things like that. Were you doing those as part of that year? You like you say you were going all over the world.
Yeah, I want to say I spoke at Ignite like 6 months before I became an MVP. Um,
So how many people are you presenting in front of it now? Ignite,
so
a few hundred.
The Ignite in Amsterdam, I filled up an auditorium. Um, so there were probably several hundred people in there. I mean, you can't see much past the first row,
Thank God.
especially once you get going and you're like, dear God,
Yeah,
like I hope I don't trip, or hope these
yeah.
people laugh at my jokes. You know, you
Well,
kind
I
of
never
black out
do.
a little bit when you're up there.
Yeah,
And it's it's you speak in front of one or speak in front of 1,000, like kind of all
doesn't
starts to
matter, does
feel,
it?
yeah, it starts to feel the same in the end, which
Yeah,
surprisingly helps you prepare for horse shows because people often get stage fright at horse shows because they're,
of course.
in front of a small audience. And I can remember being at horse shows where people are like super nervous for qualifying scores and stuff like that. And they're like, why aren't you nervous? And I'm like, I spoke at Microsoft Ignite and I got really bad reviews. And if I can get through that, I can get through this horse show because I know this judge is going to give me more constructive criticism than I can on my stinking speaking reviews. So
Yeah,
I'm fine.
yeah. I played a concert at Wembley Arena in front of 75,000. This is nothing. Yeah, no,
Exactly.
no. I keep saying I absolutely brick it every time I present. Um, I'm getting better at it, but I joined WMUG in the UK. Um, wasn't again, it wasn't one of those things I was planning to do. I stumbled into that. I just messaged them and said, "Look, I've got this blog, SCCM Mentor, and I'd like to promote it a bit." I was being a bit selfish, and they said, "Do you want to join us?" And I was like, "But yeah, all right, yeah, why not?" "Oh, we present," and I was like, "What? Christ, no!" And actually, one of my early presentations, it's the first time I met Phil
Okay.
Wilcox, and he came in and he said, "I'm really interested in this." And I was doing a Windows 10 on Raspberry Pi thing, the IoT stuff, and I was teamed up with Peter Edgerton, and we were going to make a little light blink up on a circuit board, and that was it really. And he said, "I'm really interested in this. This looks great." And I said, "Well, it's not that good, but it's all right." But it was just that feeling of, oh my god, I've got to get up in front of all these people and do this. And I didn't really have that experience as a kid. I've not done well. Actually, no. I was Joseph in the school nativity at junior school, and I had to sing in front of the parents and everything, and I was fine with that because I was probably about 6 or 7. But
Okay.
anything beyond that, no, forget it. I've not done performances. So you say you were playing the piano and all this. You probably performed in front of people there. Um, so to me, this was kind of okay. I'm not great at this, and I had this thing going in my head, and I say it all the time, where I go, my mind plays tricks with me. People aren't interested in this. This is really dull. What are you talking about? Or they all know this. They know config manager. They all know this topic. What are you talking about? This rubbish. And then you find actually at the end of it, people go, "That was really good. I didn't know that." Oh,
Yep.
okay. And you get feedback. You go, "Okay, there was a valid reason for doing that then."
Yeah.
But you know, But I've always gone, oh my God, 100 people? And then, of course, the first time I did it in front of 100 odd people, it was like you say, you don't even notice um, beyond that first couple of rows anyway.
Yeah.
Particularly now I'm wearing glasses because I can't actually see anything beyond the
Yeah.
screen.
The glare is quite
Well, I
bright.
just can't see anything. My eyesight's so shot to pieces.
Yeah.
I'm approaching 50. I can't even put my arm out any further to read my phone because my arm isn't long enough. So yeah. So I can take the glasses off. I can't see a bloody thing. I'm like Mr. Magoo, and yeah. So it works. You just take the glasses off or keep them on. It doesn't matter either way. It's all blurred.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you got the MVP. Was it 2018? You got that 2017, 2018, right around the same time as me.
Yeah, something like that. I've been awarded twice now. I have two discs on my thing, so twice now. So I just submitted for my third renewal,
Yeah, yeah,
as I'm sure, or
yeah.
I hope you did
Oh,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah. So yeah, I'm the same. I think so. I was July 2017 was when I got awarded. So yeah, um, we had to do our contributions, and 31st of March was our cut off, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then we just hope that we manage to get our way through to get renewal because it's a great program to be on and we get a lot of value add from being on it.
Oh, for sure. It's just so much work to maintain. I used to wonder when I'd hear people say, "Oh, I haven't done my renewals yet." What do you mean? Like, it's the greatest thing in the world. And I even thought that, through my first year of being an MVP, but man, it was a struggle last year. Like, should I renew? Should I not? And it's nothing to do with the program. It's so much work and so much
Yeah,
proving your work in the end. And, again, I had the same struggle this year. I'm like, do I really want to go through this another year? Like I still want to contribute, but, maybe if I don't renew, then I can do things on my own terms. And then, I'm like, well, I made it this far. I might as well, do what
yeah,
I need to do and hope for the best.
yeah. Give it a shot. Give it your best shot, and
Yeah.
it's a juggle, isn't it? It's life, work, and community balance,
Yeah.
fitting them all in somehow. And people say to me, "Where the hell do you find all the time to do it?" And then I look at other people. I said this to Adam Gross. I said, "Where the hell do you find all this time?" Because he's everywhere at the minute.
Yeah, he is for sure.
Um, yeah, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I just stopped watching TV." Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough. I mean, I don't watch that much TV to be honest myself. And I said, "I know where you're coming from." And but then in this last year, I thought, you know what, I'm going to start watching a bit of TV again, put my feet up a bit, and just chill out and try and mix up that balance a bit. And yeah, but who knows? We find out in July, and we go through that process again. Um, Fingers crossed, I suppose, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And so when you set up with you went on board with the 2 pints guys, then how did that happen? Were you asked to come on board, and what is it you do with them? Is it just a general? Is it a config manager thing? I know that they're obviously specialists in the peering side of things. So do you get involved in all that?
I jokingly call myself the marketing department. I think I'm most comfortable in technical marketing. I am very unskilled and uninterested in development. I will suggest ideas for the product, whether or not they implement them is up to them. I mean, who am I to demand for them to create some
Yeah,
feature if I can't even provide any guidance on how they'd implement it? I mean, they definitely listen to ideas that I have, and some things about the product have changed based on my input, but I'm not the one out there driving the features. That's mostly Phil and Andreas, and now Johan's working with them as well, and I know that he's working very hard on that process also. Um, but I had left Adaptiva when we bought our house. I built a house out on the countryside, and thought, oh, ha ha ha, I'm gonna be a consultant, and I'm gonna do things on my own. And that lasted about a month, and I
right.
I forget how I ended up talking to Andreas, and he was basically like, I'm gonna throw you a life raft. Like, maybe you can't see that you're struggling, but I can see that you're struggling. So why don't you come on
Yeah,
board with us? And
that's cool.
that was that. So it was actually pretty cool. And now I work for
Yeah,
Two Pint, and it's really, really great. And it's imposter syndrome all over again because
yeah.
Phil and Andreas are two of the most smartest people that I know. And you get on a call with them, and I just mostly sit there in silence because one, I have no idea what they're talking about. And and it's a little bit of like these are like my IT idols, and like
Yeah.
I'm on a phone call with them. I don't want to say anything and sound stupid, so I just like take notes and just listen mostly and
So
try to
when Phil
do.
starts chatting, you think, I'll just imagine him as Mr. Bean, driving his little Mini. And, next thing you know, the call's finished. It's great.
Yeah. I'm like, oh boy, what did they say? I have no idea. I was too starstruck
what,
to really
what was
know what was
that?
going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, they are good people. And I've met Andres. He came over for a W Mug event, and they just natural double act on stage as well, aren't they? When they get chatting
Yeah.
away doing the sessions.
I just
Um,
don't understand how people can be that smart. It's so incredible when you sit in one of their sessions, just the stuff that they know and the confidence that they have when they present. It's so great.
yeah, yeah. Put us to shame. Well, Amy, we've been chatting away for quite a while now, and I'm getting to the end because I'm not cutting you off, but I'm conscious of time here in the UK, but also I kind of tie these up around this time, kind of 80 minutes, but I could chat for longer because I've really enjoyed having a good chat with you and getting
Yeah,
to
this
know
has been great.
you as a person, and some really interesting things that you've said about your sort of self growing up and that. So yeah, thanks for coming on to the podcast. And if people want to hook up with you on the socials, where do they go and what promote your blogs and all this kind of thing?
Well, you can follow Two Point Software on Twitter. I think that's where you'll find the most technical information that you might be looking for. Um, Obviously, I have my own Twitter account, and that's A Arwidmark, and you can reach
Where
out
we
to
can learn
Johan.
about unicorns and horses and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the blog. That's where I post all of our user group meetups after they've happened. So it's a little bit less original content from me, but definitely stuff that people are still looking for because we have hundreds of people that sign up for those
Yeah.
online user groups.
And what's the user group again? It's the Far West user group,
Far
is it?
West Systems Management user group.
And what does Far West mean? That's where you live, yeah? Far West, is that right?
Yeah, so
That's my ignorance.
yeah, a little bit. So there's a sign when you leave Chicago that says Western Suburbs. And where we used to live before, that was considered a western suburb of Chicago. And this is an hour west of that. So we are very
Ah,
far west
you're the Far
of,
West. Ah,
yeah.
okay. Is it officially known as that, or just is that what you've called the user group?
That's what we've called the user group. The town is called
Right.
Maple Park. It's a very, very small but beautiful, vibrant town. And I'm so happy living out here. So,
That's
yeah.
cool, and that's a lovely, lovely way to end the podcast. So thanks once again for taking part.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great, and I can't wait to hear the other podcasts that you do with other fellow
That's cool.
MVPs. This was so
Yeah,
great. Thank
definitely
you.
true. Oh, and give Hubby a nudge. We'll organise a chat with him sometime. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
that'd be great. Nice one. Thanks, Amy.
Have a good night.
Cheers.
Bye.